I stood by the window of my apartment, watching the early afternoon light spill across the city, like honey. From this high up, everything looked peaceful, clean, composed, controlled. I liked it that way. Control had become my armor. The silk of my blouse brushed against my skin as I adjusted the cuffs, a soft reminder that appearances were everything. Even when your heart was breaking. My phone buzzed on the marble counter. A notification from Instagram. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. My daughter, Emily, had posted another set of wedding photos, the ones I'd paid for, the ones I wasn't in. I told myself I wouldn't look, but I did. There she was, radiant in white, arm linked with her father's, the man who hadn't been around for 19 years. The caption read, "So grateful to have my dad by my side for the best day of my life." My throat tightened. I'd funded every rose petal, every strand of fairy lights, every rented smile in that picture. And yet, somehow, I'd been erased. The silence of my apartment suddenly felt deafening. I picked up the phone again, staring at my reflection in the black screen. My mascara was perfect, my lips steady, but inside, everything trembled. I whispered to no one. Funny how I built the dream she's living and still ended up the ghost in it. When the next message came through, "Mom, can we talk?" I knew the past I'd buried wasn't done with me yet. 19 years ago, my world was smaller, a cramped apartment that smelled of baby powder, burnt coffee, and hope stretched too thin. Emily was only 6 months old then, her tiny fists curling around my finger, as if I was the only steady thing she knew. Maybe I was. Her father, Daniel, had already started drifting by then, late nights, silent dinners, excuses that smelled of whiskey and perfume. One evening, as I stood in the doorway holding our crying baby, he told me he needed space. I remember the exact words. Space. Like fatherhood was a room he could simply walk out of. I begged him to stay. Not for me, but for her. My voice shook, my hands trembled as I held Emily tighter. But Daniel only sighed, kissed her forehead once, and left. I still remember the sound of that door closing, the softest sound I've ever heard, and somehow the loudest. The next morning I called my mother. She didn't comfort me the way I expected. She said, "Honey, don't waste tears on a man who quits before the hard part. Wipe your face, put on your lipstick, and get to work." She came over that afternoon, bringing an old gold bracelet, hers, from when she'd been young and fierce and poor. She slid it onto my wrist and said, "This isn't for decoration. It's armor. When you wear it, remember who you are." That night, I sat by the window with Emily asleep in my arms. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass, and for the first time, I stopped crying. I whispered to her, "It's just you and me now, baby girl. And we're going to make it." It wasn't a promise made out of confidence. It was made out of defiance. I didn't know how I'd build a life for us, but I knew I would. Because if Daniel could walk away from his family without looking back, then I'd have to become both mother and father, softness and steel. That was the night I stopped waiting for rescue. That was the night I started building us a life. The years that followed were a blur of exhaustion and survival. I worked 2 jobs, receptionist by day, waitress by night, while taking online business classes after Emily was asleep. There were nights I'd stare at the blinking cursor on my computer screen, my eyes burning, whispering, "Just one more chapter." The gold bracelet on my wrist caught the dim light, reminding me why I couldn't give up. Money was always tight. Rent was a constant battle. But every small win felt like a miracle. The day I got promoted to office manager, the first time I balanced a month's bills without borrowing, the day Emily came home with a gold star on her homework and said, "Mom, I want to be like you when I grow up." That night, I cried, not from sadness, but from the first spark of pride I'd felt in years. My turning point came when I met Caroline Ross, the regional director at a company where I worked as a temporary assistant. She was sharp, confident, and everything I aspired to be. One afternoon, she found me staying late, rewriting an entire marketing report that another team had botched. Instead of reprimanding me, she smiled and said, You've got more fire than half the people I pay 6 figures. Ever thought of starting something of your own? The idea terrified me. But Caroline became my mentor, guiding me through business proposals, budgets, and the art of negotiation. Within 3 years, I launched a small event planning firm, Eden and Company, named after my daughter. My first big client came from a referral Caroline pushed my way, and from there the calls didn't stop. Still, I never told Emily how successful the company had become. She was in high school by then, smart, beautiful, and already chasing independence. I didn't want her to feel pressured by money or reputation. I told her we were comfortable, and she believed it. When she went off to college, Daniel suddenly resurfaced, all charm, apologies, and hollow smiles. He sent her birthday gifts, called once in a while, and soon enough, she started talking about him as if he'd never left. "He's trying, Mom," she'd say, defending the man who'd missed every parent-teacher conference, every Christmas morning. I didn't argue. I just smiled and said, "If he makes you happy, then that's what matters." But deep down, a quiet ache grew. The kind that comes from being replaced in someone's heart by a fantasy. Still, I kept working. Eden and Company expanded. I bought a townhouse, hired a small team, even landed celebrity clients. My name appeared in a few magazines, but always under my company's brand, never my own. I didn't need the spotlight. My success was private, sacred. Until the day Emily called to tell me she was engaged. Her voice was bubbling with joy, and then she said, "Dad's back. He wants to walk me down the aisle." I smiled into the phone, even as the gold bracelet around my wrist felt suddenly heavier. The morning of Emily's wedding, I woke before sunrise. The city was still asleep, quiet except for the faint hum of traffic below. I sat at my vanity, the same one I'd saved for years to buy, and watched my reflection in the soft light. Every wrinkle, every line carried a story, not of aging, but of endurance. I wore a navy blue gown, elegant but understated. I didn't want to outshine the bride, though there was little chance of that. Emily was radiant. I'd seen the dress fittings, paid every invoice, approved every floral arrangement. The wedding was my gift to her, the culmination of every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dream I'd built with trembling hands. But I wasn't supposed to be there. Not really. The week before, she'd called. Her voice was hesitant, careful. "Mommed about the ceremony," she said. "We decided it would mean a lot if Dad walked me down the aisle. You understand, right?" Understand. The words sliced deeper than she could imagine. So I did what I always did. I smiled, said, "Of course, sweetheart," and hung up before my voice broke. Now, standing at the back of the ballroom, I watched the moment unfold. Daniel in a crisp tuxedo, walking Emily toward the altar, his hand proudly clutching hers. The guests whispered, admiring the perfect family reunion. No one knew he'd been gone for 19 years. I stayed in the shadows, near the back rows, heart heavy, but head held high. I didn't belong in the photographs, apparently, but I wanted to see her happy. That was all I'd ever wanted. After the ceremony, the reception glittered like a fairy tale, soft golden light, champagne glasses clinking, a live string quartet playing under chandeliers. I recognized everything. The silk napkins I'd ordered, the flower arrangements I'd negotiated discounts for, the custom lighting I'd designed myself. Every piece of that perfection bore my fingerprints. And then, during the speeches, it happened. The best man raised his glass and said, "Let's toast to Emily's parents, her wonderful father, Daniel, who's been her rock." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. My chest constricted. But then, the groom, bless him, stood and cleared his throat. "Actually," he said, glancing toward me in the corner, "I think we should also thank the person who made all of this possible." He paused, smiled softly, and said, "Emily's mom." The room fell silent. Heads turned. Dozens of faces looked toward me, confused, surprised. Emily's eyes widened. I hadn't planned to speak. But in that moment, something inside me straightened, a quiet strength that had waited years to be heard. I walked toward the microphone, my heels clicking softly against the marble floor. I smiled at my daughter, then at Daniel. I wasn't going to say anything. I began, my voice steady, but since we're talking about gratitude, I suppose I should thank Daniel, too. I looked at him kindly, because when he left, he gave me something precious, a reason to fight. The audience murmured. I paid for this wedding. I continued, not boastful, just factual. Every flower, every light, every dream in this room, I built it. Not for recognition, but because I wanted my daughter to have the kind of day I never did. And I'd do it all again, even if it meant being invisible. Emily's eyes shimmered with tears. Daniel looked like he wanted to disappear. I smiled gently. But maybe next time, I said, we'll remember that love isn't about who shows up for the photo. It's about who stayed when no one was watching. A quiet hush spread through the hall. Then, one by one, people began to clap. Not polite applause, real, heartfelt. For the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I felt seen. 3 days after the wedding, Emily showed up at my townhouse unannounced. She stood at the door, still in that perfect wife glow, but her eyes were puffy and red. In her hands, she clutched a small bouquet of wilted lilies, the same kind I'd chosen for her centerpieces. "Mom," she said quietly, "can I come in?" I nodded, stepping aside. The air between us was heavy, filled with the words neither of us knew how to start. We sat at the kitchen island, the same one where I used to pack her school lunches. She traced her fingers across the counter, like she was remembering something that used to feel safe. "I'm sorry," she finally whispered. "For everything. For how I treated you. For letting him." She stopped, her voice cracking. I wanted that moment. You know? The one where I could pretend my family was whole. I took a deep breath. "I know," I said softly. "And I wanted you to have it. But pretending doesn't heal what's broken, sweetheart. It just hides it." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I saw the videos. The comments online. Everyone knows now that you paid for the wedding. I didn't mean to humiliate you." "You didn't," I said, shaking my head. "You just reminded me that sometimes love needs boundaries." She looked up, confused. "Boundaries?" "Yes," I said. "If we're going to rebuild, there have to be conditions, not punishments, but promises." She listened carefully as I spoke, every word deliberate. "First," I said, "you have to start seeing people for what they do, not what they say. That goes for me, your father, everyone. Words fade. Actions last." She nodded slowly. "Second," I continued, "you need to stop apologizing for needing me. You didn't have to erase me to grow up. You can stand tall and still have roots." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "And third," I said, my voice softening, "your father, if he truly wants to stay this time, needs to earn it. I won't stop you from seeing him, but don't confuse nostalgia with change. You deserve honesty, not history." She let out a shaky breath. "I don't even know if he'll call again." "Then maybe," I said, offering a small smile, "that's your answer." For the first time, she reached for my hand, hesitant at first, then tighter. "I don't want to lose you again, Mom." "You never lost me," I said. "You just stopped looking." We sat there for a while in silence, two women finally speaking a language that didn't need translation, love, stripped of illusion. When she left that night, she hugged me longer than she had in years. And for the first time since the word mom had started to sound like a distant echo, it felt like it belonged to me again. Months passed, and life softened around the edges again. Emily began to call more, not out of obligation, but because she wanted to. Sometimes she'd send pictures from her new apartment, or recipes she was learning to cook. Other times, she'd stop by unannounced, like she used to when she was little, curling up on my couch while I worked. The first time, she called me Mom again. Really Mom, not the distant, formal mother she'd been using for years. I cried after hanging up. Quiet tears, the kind that feel less like pain and more like release. Daniel faded as quickly as he had reappeared. There were promises, then silence. Emily didn't seem surprised this time. She only said, I think I finally understand what you meant about actions. I just nodded, proud of her for seeing clearly at last. One afternoon, she came over with a small velvet box. Inside was the gold bracelet, my mother's bracelet, polished, gleaming like new. I had it restored, she said softly. I thought maybe it's my turn to wear it now. I smiled and fastened it around her wrist. You're ready for it, I said. But remember, it's not for decoration. It's armor. She laughed through her tears, the same laugh she'd had as a baby, the one that once kept me alive during the hardest nights. Later that evening, after she left, I stood by my window again, the same view, the same city, but everything felt different. The silence wasn't heavy anymore, it was peaceful. I realized that sometimes love doesn't look like holding on. Sometimes, it's the quiet courage to let go and trust that the people you raised will find their way back. As the sun dipped below the skyline, I whispered the words I'd carried in my heart all those years, words I'd never said out loud until now. I used to think being erased meant being forgotten. But I've learned you can't erase a mother's love. It's written in every dream she dared to pay for. I smiled then, closing the curtains, finally at peace with everything I'd been. The woman who stayed, the mother who built, the ghost who found her voice again. And this time, the silence felt like grace.